I'd like to thank this video's sponsor, Honkai Star Rail. With sponsors like Honkai Star Rail, it allows me to do videos like this one. Honkai Star Rail is a multi-platform space fantasy RPG from Hoyoverse, the makers of Genshin Impact. Since its release, the game has won Best Mobile Game at TGA, the Best Game on Google Play, and the Best Game for the App Store in 2023. The game just released its massive 2.0 update with a festive and vibrant new world, Pinakoni. With this new update, players can explore a plethora of new maps, collect stunning new characters, and dive into the dream-woven wonders that the Pinakoni has to offer. While it initially just seems like a luxurious vacation getaway, as you end up entering the realm of dreams, you learn that there's some hidden layers to be uncovered. But there's also some new things like some new characters. For example, Black Swan. Black Swan is an elegant woman who practices divination using a crystal ball and cards, exuding a mysterious aura. She's focused on dot damage capabilities and is a wind-type Nihility character. Then there's the new character Sparkle, who is a mischievous, unpredictable girl. She's more about being a quantum-type Harmony character, which is capable of restoring skill points for her allies. But there's a lot more with the 2.0 version, including wall walking, transformative mazes, and much more. Get 10 free draws now and log in for 7 consecutive days to receive 20 Star Rail special passes. You can then use these to get the new characters that I just mentioned. Use the link and code in the description and on screen to make sure you can obtain your 50 Stellar Jade, and download and enjoy the game. Wait no longer, detectives, dive into the dream-woven wonders today, as the Pinakoni awaits you in Honkai Star Rail. Thank you to Honkai Star Rail for sponsoring this video, and let's get back to the editorial. In a truly historical, never-before-seen moment, NCSoft has granted a license to the City of Heroes private server, Homecoming, to operate and function with their blessing and host a server. Wowzas, where to start? Now, there's been some stipulations with this, but most of those aren't really publicly known. All we know is that Homecoming is allowed to operate the server, not other servers, and still can continue to fund the server with donations and continue their development. I wanted to do a video to react to this, not only because people kept requesting it, but because I also have to eat some crow. Because, frankly speaking, I never thought that NCSoft would do this, but also because this could mean big things for other virtual worlds and their preservation efforts going forward. NCSoft and their history with City of Heroes is interesting, because unlike many games that have found themselves on my Death of a Game series before, City of Heroes wasn't failing and wasn't a failure. Most famously, it actually was sunsetted while it was still turning a profit and having a larger than normal audience. No matter how much corporate dorks or other people try to convince you otherwise. To quote my own video, NCSoft had impending launches of both Blade and Soul and Guild Wars 2, MMOs that were projected to be a large future for the company. And although City of Heroes was profitable, it wasn't popular in Korea, which was the largest source of income for NCSoft by a country margin. Rumblings happening behind the scenes, and apparently NCSoft had the intentions of terminating City of Heroes. Paragon Studios developers, according to Gamasutra's article, tried to negotiate with NCSoft, and it very much seemed like NCSoft was open to that and having them buy out the game's intellectual property from the publisher. However, seemingly out of nowhere, NCSoft would announce that on August 31st, 2012, that Paragon Studios would be closing shop as well as City of Heroes. NCSoft would then state that they looked to sell the franchise multiple times but were unable to find a suitable partner, which, sorry, was just bullshit. Because according to those that were in the know, NCSoft was okay with the deal up until the 11th hour when they pulled out and then never came back in. Many years would go by until sometime in 2019, news would hit the web that the source code for City of Heroes was leaked, and that it was more than just leaked. There had been servers existing in basically secrecy for almost 6 years. This was one of the bigger scandals in the history of virtual worlds, basically ever. The fear that I had immediately was that NCSoft was going to squash it and all involved. Negotiations would actually open up, however, and it seemed like things were trending positively, with numbers hitting insanely impressive 100k plus players and clocking in at over 47 million hours played. NCSoft wouldn't be able to ignore them because of this. and thus the curse of success. Kind of how if someone prints Mario t-shirts in your local neighborhood, they're likely fine up until they attract just more than local attention. And then suddenly the guy running the entire thing was gone. And it seemed like not only did negotiates stagnate, NCSoft would actually re-strengthen their legal right to defend City of Heroes. Things were not looking good. It really felt like everything was stacked against City of Heroes in the efforts to preserve the title. NCSoft started to become more and more like a villain, and already having quite the poor reputation in Korea amongst online gamers on top of that. And then suddenly, to start off the new year of 2024, out of nowhere, and I mean actually out of nowhere and not just the way that you say it on videos for hyping effect, NCSoft would grant Homecoming a license to host private servers. This was the culmination of over 12 years of work involving multiple different parties and many long phone calls and arguments, but I was truly shocked to see that NCSoft had made this move, as I'm sure that many others were as well. But why did they make the move? Well, that's a pretty good question, and Korean companies are often notoriously tight-lipped about strategy compared to most other regions. My thoughts are that they don't really see the use of an IP itself, since it failed in their market, and it's a calculated decision to regain some goodwill as a publisher and developer, especially on the wake of launching a new game in the West, like Throne and Liberty. There are very few chances that this move was monetarily based because, though it should be mentioned, if you took a classic WoW approach and designed new content in the same old vein, you could certainly monetize that eventually, but I really think that NCSoft was looking for a goodwill play here, and they found one that's been basically on their doorstep for over a decade. The only other time something like this has happened was in the case of EverQuest's Project 1999, which has the official go-ahead of Daybreak, the license holder. Now, interestingly enough, Star Wars Galaxy's the emulating version, or Star Wars Galaxy's Emu, technically doesn't have permission, and not really the same deal, but has been operating without issue for over 14 years. That means that this is a never-before-seen sort of deal, or at the very least a novel thing, that perhaps could set a precedent that motivates future publishers and rights holders to do something similar, especially if there is a way they can get something out of it, right? But don't scoff at precedent, right? With it existing now, we actually have some official cases to point to for those in charge of video game preservation, since that is rather particularly lacking in the world of virtual worlds. Technically, you can preserve a virtual world, just not in its actual form, you know, live and all, which doesn't really help matters right now. To be honest, that's probably the next big hurdle for preservation. If we can manage to convince those in charge in the US that virtual worlds need to be online to properly function and be preserved, then we can use it as a legal and official basis going forward. Those in charge of preservation are those aligned with the government at the current moment. The downside being that it takes them a bit of time to move properly, especially with how young the industry is. But the good news is, as the link displays on screen, the US government does at least have an idea of what virtual worlds are, and that preserving them is a different challenge. Just back in 2019, there were some expansions in the DMCA exemptions, specifically with online virtual titles. However, as the article explains, it wasn't a total victory for virtual worlds, so the victories are still slow coming, which makes this NCSoft Homecoming victory so pivotal. Because only just a few years ago, we had one of the best museums for online gaming preservation close its door, so really any good momentum right now is needed. Unfortunately though, trademarks will still remain to be an issue, as the way that they are protected is, well, by enforcing them. But at least there now exists a official basis, even if it's a flawed one, for virtual world video game preservation. In the end, this doesn't mean that video game preservation for online titles is fixed, nor is it necessarily going to be fixed in the next couple of years. But we have been waiting decades at this point, and seeing that NCSoft, the most unlikely of publishers, was willing to play ball, I think that this really does bode well for the future of online virtual worlds, and I hope that others, like them, will do the same. Thanks for watching.